welcome back to Compact Convos. Today we're going to be talking about cavalry in the age of the black powder. So, Caleb, talk about the purpose of cav in this era. Let's start with that.
Yeah, Nick. So Cav is a must-have for any intelligent war game in the Age of Black Powder. Cav is used in many different roles, and we'll cover the different types of Cav and their roles. But it's not these are used for either quick response forces, for raiding, and basically for emergency situations and scouting. Cav has been an essential part of warfare, really since the beginning of warfare itself. So any black powder game must include cav. Most battles and all campaigns from the black powder era included cav in some sort. Some areas a little less, some areas a little more. Like the Revolution, for instance, you're going to have a little bit less cavalry for the British, whereas the Americans will have more cav. But if you talk about the 7 Years' War in Europe, you have whole cavalry divisions moving to engage, especially when we're talking about Napoleonics in the early period. So, Cav is very essential for wargaming, and I think we should really cover these types. And there's so many different types of Cav, and there's definitely going to be more types than what we have listed here. So maybe list in the comments any additional Cav units that we might not talk about here.
Yes, and the British did send us a great cav commander called Tavington. All right, so in cav, how do we paint them? How do we base them? Do I have to have horses a certain color? What's up with this?
Yeah, so when basing Cav, our club normally bases it 21 minis to a base. That allows that extra one is for the cavalry standard if you choose to do that. If not, you can just put 20. But our club mainly does 1-to-1 scale battles, so that's how we've chosen to break it down. As far as painting, it varies widely based on era and country, but I would say for your light cav, they generally had decent looking uniforms. We're talking about Hussars, the Cossacks, so definitely varying uniforms. When we talk about irregular cavalry, these are kind of like militia calves, so you can make them as detailed or as crappy as you want. These are just farmers that grab a shortened musket and hop on a horse, right? But whenever you're talking about heavy cavalry, these are your armored cav units. Kind of think of like the winged hussars, your cuirassier. These are mainly armored units. And we're trying to get, into the Napoleonic era, that's starting to go away, but it still counts. So definitely include some metallic colors, those breastplates. And if you're talking about the winged hussars, those things are pretty much, those guys are clad in armor. So just keep that in mind whenever you're painting those. And whenever you're painting cav, please try not to make all of your horses the same exact color. Paint them in batches. Maybe do 20 brown, 20 black, 20 white, 20 tan, and then mix them all up and then randomly pick them. That's what I would recommend.
Good advice right there. So let's start talking about light cav. What are the different types of light cav, and how does one implement them into the war game, the big map, and the battlefield itself?
Yeah, light cav, historically, some examples, you're looking at Hussars, Cossacks. These are units that are not expected to remain in the fight long. These are units that were mainly scouts, raiders, or skirmishers of the army. They can screen the main force, gather intelligence, pursue retreating enemies, which is a big one in our game, and harass supply lines. So in campaign, I have 2 bases of light cav, and I know the enemy is being supplied via this route. I'll put those 2 units of light cav on this road and tell them to intercept any supplies, either capture or destroy it. I know in our current Rev War campaign, both sides have been using light cav to screen each other. So both, like the British light cav and the American light cav, have just been watching each other, where behind those cav forces the main armies are moving, but you can't see that because the enemy cav is preventing that. So light cav is really good to get intelligence and to kind of protect um, your army from watching eyes, kind of say, because I don't know if you know anything, Nick, but I mean, you haven't really seen too much past that British screen because they've had Cav just lining it. So it's really good. Tabletop implementation, we give these light Cav units a high movement because they don't have armor weighing them down, and maybe a bonus to spotting hidden units. And these are really good at chasing routing troops. Like me, I normally like to keep during battle my light Cav in reserve to chase down the retreating enemy army should that happen. But you want to use these aggressively on the flanks for scenario objectives rather than just charging formed infantry. These are not heavy hitting guys. They're not on the biggest horses. So you're not going to be able to charge down an infantry square with light cav, right? So you definitely want these to be more harassing units, not meant to be in a prolonged fight at all.
No, I got you. And you were mentioning it is up until, and I know it hasn't came out on a video yet, but up until the siege, yeah, I didn't know where most of their army was until they all pop up after a siege. Um, what about heavy cav? You kind of mentioned it earlier. What's heavy cav? What's their uses, and how do we implement them?
So heavy cav is the on the totally other spectrum than light cav. So some examples of these are your cuirassier and household cavalry. So these are like shock troops. Their job's to deliver a devastating charge against weakened infantry formations or even enemy cavalry. Including these on the tabletop, you're going to want a powerful charge bonus, high morale, better armor protection. If you're getting these units based off of a points-based game, these units need to be very expensive. Now, the one thing about these is they can stay in somewhat prolonged combat better than light infantry, but you don't want to keep them there.
Kind of chasing
You,
down the
unless,
enemy again type thing.
yeah, but on that, I would say your heavy cab definitely needs to move just a little bit slower than that light cab. Okay. And in battle, I would keep these as a reserve until the decisive moment. Kind of think about Napoleon Eylau. He keeps a Muraz cavalry division, some heavy cav, in reserve until something goes wrong in the battle, and then he sends them in to rescue. I think it was like 2 divisions from the Russians. So keep these for a decisive moment, or unless you know that it's going to work very well. A poorly timed charge can waste your most valuable troops. Um,
Battle
Now,
rolls as
I'm not going
well.
to say yes, absolutely, and I wouldn't say these guys, even though they're armored, they're going to have a better protection against cannonballs, right? Than light cav. I think they have the same probability of getting shot, but that's just something to think about when you're thinking about heavy cav. They need to be a bit more rare in the game, and you definitely want to save those for the most decisive moment of the engagement.
Um, no, I get it. It is I'll get my Riders of Rohan uh, to charge later. So my personal favorite one, the Dragoons, because Dragoons go from the age of musket to well into our Civil War. Um, how do we implement those the best? And what are Dragoons overall?
So dragoons originally are mounted infantry, and they evolved into a more versatile medium cavalry. They can fight mounted or dismounted depending on the circumstances. Essentially, these are guys that have like maybe shortened weapons, firearms, sort of say, and they're kind of rapidly redeployable infantry. Some examples kind of think of the British Dragoons. From the American War of Independence. You can think of the Shasha al Cheval from Napoleon's army. So these are really versatile infantry that can be moved around the board. In melee, I normally treat them as light cav. And when they're mounted, they have a disadvantage shooting, but when they're dismounted, they shoot like regular infantry. I would give them just regular combat abilities on the tabletop. They have that ability to dismount and mount, and they have very flexible mission profiles. Definitely not as strong as heavy cavalry, nor as fast as light cavalry. So they're kind of that medium. So these are perfect for scenarios involving villages, bridges, and rough terrain where flexibility matters. If you want to, say you're trying to beat the enemy to a bridge with your infantry, but you have dragoons, your dragoons hurry up right up there, dismount. Now you have an infantry formation at that bridge. So I know dragoons have given me a lot of headache, in our Southern Colonies campaign, thanks to Nathan and Lee's Legion.
Yes,
But
sir.
these dragoons that they can work just as light cavalry as well. They can be a good raiding force, a good reconnaissance force as well. So I would definitely say these are not, very rare troops. But of course, it's all depending on the situation. Like in the American Revolution, the British overall had less cavalry than the Americans, right? So definitely kind of keep a ratio in mind. Your entire army can't be made of just dragoons. You definitely want some different types in there.
Yes, as I currently have my dragoons going up into the New York territory and dispensing good old fashioned American justice. Is Hey, I like my dragoons. I've been using them wiser this Middle Colonies campaign than I previously did.
I'm pretty
Is
sure you've committed several war crimes, looting several villages, tar and feathering mayors and stuff, right?
First off, not a war crime yet. Secondly, I'm going pretty historical for what the American populace did. So you boys are just ardent patriots, and they're letting out their frustrations on the crown, and I'm here for it. It is, but yes, I'm doing all of those things. I'm going from town to town, just mollywopping people. I need to give them an actual mission. I just find this one more fun. But what about Lancers then? And I'm certain it's not a car, but what are Lancers?
So lancers are a form of light cavalry, but they're armed with a long lance. We're thinking about jousting, kind of think medieval knights charging in with massive lances. A little different. These guys aren't armored. These cavalrymen are more specialized in delivering a terrifying shock charge against disrupted formations. Um, they generally have lighter yet faster horses, right? They're trying to get that momentum to smack into the enemy. Some examples of these are the Polish and French lancers from the Napoleonic Wars, and Uhlans, another form of lancer. Um, I would say you can paint these up just as light cav, just ensure they have lances. One, so that way it looks good on the board, but two, so that way you can easily identify these units, because we normally play at 6 mm scale. So these units need to be readily somewhat identifiable on the board. Um, these are not meant for prolonged melee at all. These are unarmored guys. They might have a sword, but they also have a lance in hand, right? So they're going to have to drop their lance and they're going to have to pull out their sword. So these are really charge in and charge out. Charge in, charge out. The main goal here is to charge an enemy formation, break it, and then retreat. So that way either infantry or heavy cavalry can follow in behind it and mop up that disrupted infantry. Um, when putting these on the tabletop, they need to really get a massive first charge bonus. So they're going to have reduced effectiveness after the initial impact. So if you charge in, let's say you get to roll a 2 to 6 on a d6 on the first roll or on the first charge. But if you stay in combat after that, I'd make it a 5 to 6, because these guys are not specialized in this close quarters melee. They need to get out of there. They could also have a strong psychological effect on the enemy as well. So keep that in mind. Reward successful charges, but make them less effective in prolonged combat once the lance advantage disappears. So you might want to keep these for a decisive moment, or these could be your decisive moment. You keep a reserve, like let's say a lancer brigade in reserve, and you charge at the enemy, and that is what initiates your main attack. Um, these could be, depending on the era and the place you're at, these could be very rare. These could be very common. You hardly had any in the Revolution. I think I've maybe read a single account in the Civil War of some Confederate lancers. But these are going to be very, very popular in Europe. Napoleonic, especially Napoleonic, even in 7 Years' War, some aspects, but Lancers go all the way back up to Roman times. So we're talking purely black powder, reduced probably in the American theater of any war, but very much common and popular in European theaters of war.
Yes, as the movie Washington about to come out, George Washington's red uniform, which is totally historically accurate. He even tells one
Yes.
of the generals that you haven't fought in this terrain. It's not the open battlefields of Europe. So that might be why
Hmm.
Lancers weren't over here, because we got a lot of trees, a lot of hills, Appalachian Mountains. We got a lot of stuff. Um, Now, one that I have just now got some irregular cavalry, some militia cav. What other types of irregular cavalry are there other than militia, and how do you use those?
Yeah, so a form of irregular cavalry, and you need to treat these as light cav as well. Some examples could be those Cossacks, Russian Cossacks, some tribal horsemen, and as you mentioned, like militia cav. So these are not your professional troops. These guys might not have any professional training, and if they do, it's very little. Um, I mean, it's really in the name, like militia cav. It's the same as militia in the game. These should also have excellent movement, and depending on the theater, ambush abilities. So we're thinking maybe Napoleon's invasion of Spain, the Spanish guerrillas. You could have some guerrilla cavalry, and they're able to easily ambush French columns. Maybe they get a bonus, but nothing to remember is that these will have poor discipline, poor morale, and they should have limited effectiveness against formed troops. So if you have infantry in a square or even infantry in a column, these guys will not be able to easily break it at all. So I wouldn't say do not rely on a regular cavalry for a pitched battle, especially melee. You can probably use them to like raid the flanks a little bit, but these are probably going to be more useful on the campaign, where these guys can scout, raid, and disrupt supply. These should be somewhat easy to get depending on the theater. Once again, you're going to have a lot of this in the American Revolution, um, and even in the French and Indian War. But irregular cav, that's not really making up the armies of Europe, the more professional armies. So I won't say make them rare, but keep them theater and era specific like the rest of these. So yeah.
Okay, and then the last one that I've not heard of, I'm looking forward to hearing about it. The Guard Cavalry. What are the Guard Cavalry? What is the Guard
Yeah.
Cavalry?
So we don't technically have this in our rule set yet, but we're wanting to add it. So guard cavalry, you can kind of think of it as it should get the heavy cavalry stats, but these are more elite cav. So where your heavy cav might be armored horsemen that have some training, you could think of guard cav as yes, armored horsemen, but these guys are veterans. They are very experienced. They know maybe where to pierce a line more precisely than your regular heavy cav. So these are elite formations reserved for crucial moments of the battle. These are often going to be composed of veteran soldiers with superior equipment and training. Let's think of some examples. We have Napoleon's Imperial Guard Cavalry, the British Household Cavalry. So these are going to be rare. And if you're doing a points game, these need to be very expensive. They need to have exceptional morale, much like elite infantry in the game, where they basically fight to the death. These guard cav need to have superior combat statistics, but you need to make sure it's balanced. You can't have all the cav in your army be Napoleon's Imperial Guard cav. It's just not historically correct, and it's not really balanced. You need to treat these as a precious reserve. These guys need to be your emergency response force. If your line is faltering, you send these in as a last resort. Their appearance on the battlefield should really feel like a major event. If the enemy is if you're fighting, you're in a battle, and the enemy sees guard cav come over the hill, that like the enemy commanders need to be looking at themselves and be like, "Whoa, okay, should we just retreat off the field at this point?" Um, But as we've done with all of our elite units, do not make anything a guaranteed hit, right? There's always chances throughout history where, let's say, a militia could hold off a guard unit, right? There's always that small possibility. And we see that at Waterloo, right? Napoleon sends the Imperial Guard in, they get absolutely massacred. mollywopped, as you mentioned earlier. So don't make anything, especially the units, do not make it a guaranteed hit, but you need to make it have like a very good probability of it doing well.
I got you. I got you. So that concludes our cav, unless we're forgetting any there, Caleb.
No, that's good. I would say, like I mentioned in the video earlier, guys, if there is a major cav type we missed, throw it down in the comments. Let us know, and we could probably talk about it in the comments for a little bit and get some ideas from each other.
Yes, and shout out to our person who commented on our infantry video. I forget their name off the top of my head right now, but telling us about Marines apparently having a flank company that could have been Grenadiers. We're gonna look into that and definitely try to implement that in future campaigns. But until then, thanks for stopping by.
That's it for today's episode. For battles, brushes, and everything in between, make sure you subscribe and join the community. Until next time, Generals, see you on the tabletop.